And if you look on slide 19, this is the story of this happening. Very quickly, we will stop here today. I'm not going to go into logical positivism. We're already over time. Next time, I will tell the full story. But very quickly, not to leave you hanging, there has been a revolution after these two new ideas were born, positivism and logicism. Clearly, both rationalist and empiricist camps needed a reform urgently. The mind does not receive imprints of empirical facts, but rather interpretations and construction. The mind constructs and interprets the physical world. We're not receiving input, like you receive, a clean one-to-one correspondence. No, this is complicated. The mind interprets, and this is something that schools in psychology kept exploring during the earlier phase of the 20th century with the behaviorist camp. If you know some psychology, especially, for example, the B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner, I want my psychology to be exactly a physical science, and now he's making a comeback, this idea of conditioning, right? All of these artificial intelligence, all these marketing schemes, we will talk about it in due time. So the mind does not receive clean imprint, but it interprets. So this is against the empirical camp, of course, because if the mind interprets, then your knowledge does depend on your impression on the mind. On the other hand, empiria seems to rule the scientific process. Relying on armchair physics or philosophy will mostly lead to erroneous claims. If you want to only rely on your minds and on your conclusions and on your whatever, you will fall exactly in the same pit as Immanuel Kant fell, and as Hegel and Heidegger and all these people, the main big rationalists, fell, right? For example, Immanuel Kant concluded that Euclidean geometry is one of our instincts. Not only something very useful, but one of our instincts. Something that we can never doubt, never question. Time and space is something very, this instinct that we have is very deep rooted with us. We cannot question it, we cannot get out of it. Of course, after the relativistic revolution with Albert Einstein, all of this fell down. And even after the relativistic revolution, you still have people like, what's his name, Henri Poincaré, who maintained that, and at some point I will expose this to you in great detail, because this is the topic of my master's thesis. This Poincaré conventionalist thesis, he maintained that geometry and physics are completely independent. You pick whatever geometry you want, and I will give you whatever physics you want. If you want to keep Euclidean space, of course you can keep it, but you have to change the physics. You have to include some things in the physics that are, not the classical physics we know now. Perhaps you will have speeds bigger than the speed of light. Perhaps the speeds will even add. Perhaps you have, you will have a weird physics, but you can keep whatever geometry. So they are completely unrelated for him. Why? Going back to this initial idea by Kant that geometry is an instinct. So we will, even if we discovered, he says, Poincaré verbatim, even if we discovered that there are other geometries, and at the time we did, we will still stick to Euclidean because we like it, he says, because this is the most attractive to us. Anyway, not our topic today. I just wanted to emphasize that both camps needed a major reform. And in the beginning of the 20th century, again, going back to Wissam's comment earlier, the rationalism changed meaning. This became a form of empiricism that emphasized the role of the mind. So we are all empirical, right? We all want to rely on empirical data. Relying on our mind first and our interpretation first, kind of not really well. But there's this old debate in philosophy whether is it the matter that creates really the knowledge, or is it the knower? So there's the hypothesis being born, the scientist observes. The hypothesis is formulated, the scientist formulates it. The hypothesis is tested, the scientist tests it. Oh, it is the genius of the scientist. It kind of transformed into this very lightly, not very, I'm not sure if it's explicit or implicit at this point. It is obvious that we are moving towards more and more positivism, if I were to use the word. This traditional rationalist idea, doing knowledge and doing philosophy like Plato and Aristotle and Hegel and Heidegger did, does not work anymore. people look down on it during this phase. We continue to slide 20. Logical positivism was born. Now, this movement takes the logical from the mathematics as the only reliable mental tool. Not your impressions, not your opinions, not your feelings. You want to use a mental tool, you use logic. And they take the positive part from Auguste Comte. This last stage ruled by empirical observation as the only way to generate reliable knowledge about the world. You combine these two, you get logical positivism. They are against idealism and spiritualism. Idealism, again, going back to the philosophers, especially they had Hegel in mind, because if you ever read Hegel, it's very difficult to understand Hegel reading Hegel. People understand Hegel because people like Peter Smith wrote about Hegel. So it's the explanation of Hegel or the interpretation of Hegel that's much more useful for a student. If you read Hegel first time, it's complicated, it's not clean, not because the idea he's trying to express is difficult alone, but because he's a messy writer himself, and because all of these terms are loose. These terms that he's Geist, the spirit of the world, the spirit of what are you talking about? The logical positivist will hold Hegel in the collar, like, what are you talking about? Give me empirical. Give me something I can touch, something I can see, something I can do experiments. That's the meaning. They reject all those weird, loose, idealist kind of speech. They give meaning only to observable statements. If something is and I will put quotations around the word observable here, because we will define what observable is exactly, and we will see that it's a big problem. What is observable? But taken face value now, only observable statements are meaningful under positive logical positivism. And to answer the question we started the room with, since the subtle changes in the rules of physics and in the constants, those very small, are by definition, those very small to detect, we cannot really detect them even if we were watching. What happens when? This is meaningless now. It's not only false or true. This is meaningless under logical positivism because it is unobservable. By construction, this situation, you cannot make empirical observation. And since you cannot make empirical observations, the terms you are using are meaningless. We cannot understand something that is not observable to give it the status of truth. Next week, we will